時を止まれ。
In the 11th episode of Dandadan, we are introduced to a new Japanese urban legend in the form of the living anatomical model, or, as they say in Japanese, the Jintai Mokei. I didn't know this at first when I started reading the manga, but the creatures and characters in this story are actually real-world ideas that Tatsuyuki Nobu incorporated. They're cryptids and urban legends that he populated the world of Dandadan with. In this video, I'm going to review these ideas as they exist in real life to discover the history behind them that Tatsu brought into his story and made his own. Just a heads up, this is going to be a basic intro to the idea and won't be going super in depth. If you want to know more, I encourage you to go dig into the research for this stuff yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we get to dig into a more recent urban legend again with this one, considering how recent anatomical models have become commonplace in schools, relative to all of Japanese history, anyway. For this one, I'm once again relying on info obtained from samkalinsky.com, the merch site that was invaluable to me for background on Acro Silky, so make sure to give it a look and see if anything catches your fancy. I'll also be pulling info from TV Tropes, of all places, since they happen to have some background on this one as well. It's believed that this particular urban legend originates in the unsettling appearance of most anatomical models, which feature a half-and-half approach that has one side of the body having its skin removed to demonstrate musculature, as well as have removable parts to demonstrate organ placement and shapes. Obviously, something resembling a human just having the flesh flayed off on one half of the body is a bit of intense imagery. If it were in a movie, it'd probably shoot the rating right up to an R nowadays. But the academic setting maybe takes the edge off a bit, or makes it even worse, depending on your perspective. Part of this also relies on the Uncanny Valley effect, so let's get into what that is. The concept of the Uncanny Valley actually originates in Japan, believe it or not, mainly because it was originally proposed as a hypothesis by a robotics professor, and Japan, of course, led the early charge on robotics research back in the 70s and onwards. Mori Masahiro is a roboticist who is almost 100 years old, who originally proposed the idea in an article in the magazine Energy in 1970, where he coined the term in Japanese Bokimi no Tani, which was later literally translated into English as The Uncanny Valley in the 1978 book Robots, Fact, Fiction, and Prediction, written by Jasiah Reichardt. The original idea behind the Uncanny Valley, as Mori Hakase put it, was that as a robot approached a perfect recreation of a human, a given observer's emotional reaction to it is to grow more and more empathetic, as if looking at another human, until a certain point is crossed when coming close to a perfect recreation, at which point the observer's reaction quickly and sharply veers into revulsion. Past that point, the observer swings back to the highest levels of empathy possible as the recreation of a human likeness approaches complete perfection. When plotted on a graph, as you can see here, the sharp decline followed by a subsequent sharp rise creates a sort of valley on the graph, which the professor dubbed the Uncanny Valley. If you've ever looked at something meant to recreate the appearance of a human, but felt like something was just super off about it and creeped you out, you've experienced this Uncanny Valley effect. Since its introduction as an idea in robotics, it's expanded over the years to be considered in other areas of study, such as in computer-generated animation. For example, the appearance of Billy, the baby in Pixar's 1988 animated short Tin Toy, provoked negative audience reactions, leading to the film industry taking the concept of the Uncanny Valley seriously for the first time. Okay, I think that's enough of a primer for the Uncanny Valley. But seriously, that was all just from the Wikipedia page, and there's so much more on there, so check it out if you find it interesting. Back on the main topic, the idea seems to be that this urban legend surrounding anatomical models came to be due to the Uncanny Valley effect, as well as the unsettling imagery associated with these models. In Japan, it apparently rose to prominence because of a loose series of works known as Gakkō no Kaidan, or school ghost stories. Originally published as a book in 1990 by middle school teacher Tsunemitsu Toru, who collected hundreds of ghost stories from his students to serve as a source for the book. It's gone on to become something like a Japanese cross between Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, producing hundreds of books over the years and leaving a large mark on the Japanese horror landscape. Gakkō no Kaidan really hit its stride in popularity in 1995, when the movie adaptation was released, and notably, one of the more memorable aspects of that film was the anatomical model yokai, which eventually led to the rise of the Jintai Mokei in the cultural consciousness of Japan. Other well-known urban legends that have pervaded Japan's pop culture following the surge in popularity of Gakkō no Kaidan include things like old-school buildings being haunted, toilet-bound Hanako-kun, Beethoven or other classical music composers leaving their portraits to play instruments. Definitely remember this one for no particular reason. The number of steps on a staircase changing, or the fourth step being a gateway to the realm of the dead, and plenty of stories about specific yokai, such as ones we've talked about before, like Kuchisake Onna. Interestingly, you might have noticed that the female anatomical model, Hana, is lacking arms and legs. Other than economical reasons, seeing as how female arms and legs aren't all that different from a male's from a structural and functional standpoint, and so it's cheaper to produce only the parts that would be different, there's actually a bit of a history behind the divergence between the prevalence of male and female anatomical models. Well, the analysis page for the eerie anatomy model on TV Tropes has a rundown on it, so I'll just read that off for you. By far, most anatomy models that show up in fiction are male, which is truth in television. For one, for the longest time it was considered improper to show off a woman in any state of undress, which is rather unavoidable with an anatomy model. For two, men's bodies were thought of as the default, and women's an inconsequential aberration that didn't deserve the same level of attention. There are two types of anatomy models notable for favoring the female form, but they're not among the types found in fiction, because they're not the types readily thought of when one imagines an anatomy model. The first are so-called anatomical Venuses. These are drop-dead gorgeous statues in reclining Venus pose of which the front torso can be removed to rummage around through the organ bits inside. They're often pregnant because the female reproductive system was what was of interest compared to the male configuration. Anatomical Venuses are made of wax, but fancied up with real hair, glass eyes, and the like. They became a thing in the late 18th century, but the general idea is a little older. Of note is Abraham Chauvet's early 18th century female model of wax with glass veins to show blood circulation. But people didn't like that one very much because it looked like it was in severe pain. The other case is a case of accidental but convenient fan service. In the late 1920s, the Deutsches Hygiene Museum in Dresden created the transparent man, Glasner Mensch, or glass human. This type of anatomy model is a transparent human form with a metal skeleton and the multi-material organs inside. It drew good attention, so a transparent woman was ordered and, well, naked woman on display, round 2. In the decades since, more transparent women have been produced than transparent men. Incidentally, the statue Verity that adorns the harbor in Ilfracombe, Devon, depicts a woman with a raised sword in her hands standing on several books. The left half is normal, the right half, skinless. As with anatomical Venuses, she's pregnant. Of course, just like the rest of the urban legends and mythology featured in the work, Tatsu took some liberties to incorporate these weirdos into his story. In this instance, he gave Taro one of Okarun's balls to give him a reason related to the plot to show up and get involved other than just sheer random hilarity, and then went further to make his motivation to be with the female anatomical model he fell in love with to serve as further motivation for Okarun in his pursuit of his feelings for Momo. I wasn't able to find evidence anywhere of instances of the anatomical model urban legend incorporating these elements, so I assume they're original to Tatsu's depiction of them in his story. As always, it continues to showcase Tatsu's crazy talent when it comes to balancing not only a classic straightforward plot and driving it forward in interesting, varied ways, but also the romantic comedy aspect of the plot and the budding relationship between its two leads, which in many works would become what a lot of people refer to as a romantic plot tumor that they would have been better off excising from the story. But here, Tatsu is juggling it right alongside the actual plot like it's nothing. Anyway, that's all I have for you in this episode of The Truth Behind Dandadan. Hopefully you enjoyed this little review of the real-world ideas behind the show. Feel free to drop a comment if you can think of any other info I didn't manage to find. If you did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe as well so you can support the channel and see what else I put out. Until I see you next time, stay safe and have fun.